Right, so I'm going to start off with a little listening test, and I'm going to play a really low sub bass. And if you can hear this, then you're going to be able to easily follow along with what I'm doing. If you can't quite hear it, you can still follow the techniques that I'm doing, but you'll just have to try it out for yourself when you're in the studio and you've got a better listening environment. So this is the sub bass. And if you can hear that, let's get into this. Now, way back when I went to college to learn music production, one of the first things we learned about was frequency masking and how to separate a kick drum and a bass. Now, of course, this was way back before the days of YouTube or Google. So coming across this information was kind of like gold dust at the time. The way that we were taught to do it was to listen to where the frequencies of the kick and the bass were crossing over, and where the kick is most predominant, we would make a cut on the bass EQ at that point, and then do a little boost on the EQ where the bass is more predominant, and then on the kick drum channel, do the opposite thing. So there's quite a cool little way of doing this within Cubase, and that is just to open up the channel strip. So I've got my bass group channel open here, and under this drop-down menu, what I can do is select kick. And what we will see now in the frequency analyzer is the bass frequencies in blue and the kick frequencies in orange. So let's have a listen and a look at that. So right here we can see the kick drum is most prevalent, and around here we can see that the bass is most prevalent. So on this bass channel, what we would do is duck the bass here and give it a little boost here. Let's just double check that against the frequency analyzer again. And then on the kick channel, do the exact opposite. Let's bring up the bass. And let's do an opposite move. And you can hear it works fine. We get a little bit of separation, and it's a technique that has worked for thousands of people for decades and decades. But let's look at another more modern, I guess, technique. All right, so if you hadn't guessed it already, the next technique we're going to look at to separate the kick and the bass is sidechain compression. So if you've not heard of it, then you're about to. It's a very popular, some would say overused technique within dance music. I really like the sound of it. It gives you that kind of nice pumping sound that just always sounds good when you're in a club. So to set this up, I'm just using Cubase's stock compressor. I've got it on my bass group again. To activate it, you need to click on this button here, activate sidechaining. To set it up, click on the cog. So add a sidechain source, which is going to be my kick drum. And just to test if it's working, we should see this gain reduction meter go down every time the kick drum hits. Cool. Now, to determine how much sidechain compression or ducking that we want, we use this threshold slider here. To determine the ratio, or I guess the severity of the compression, we use the ratio. To determine how quickly after the kick drum hit does the compressor compress, we use the attack dial. And to determine how soon after the kick drums hit does the compressor stop working and the volume go back to normal, we use the release. And for now, I'm going to take off makeup gain so we can control the overall output here. So let's have a play about with that. So you can hear that, getting a nice pumping effect on the bass. And I'll just do an A-B by bypassing the effects so you can hear the before and after. So yeah, a really cool technique that I'm sure that everyone's familiar with. Now, the reason I didn't use either of those techniques in this track is simply because they just didn't work for what I've got envisioned for what I want this track to eventually be. Now, I just didn't want that pumping sound because I just felt like it didn't fit with the bass that I had. And when I was using just EQ, it kind of felt like the bass was getting a bit too thin, and I really wanted this to be a bass heavy track. So my next option was to look at dynamic EQ, which is a mixture between EQ and the dynamics of compression. And now, of course, I've got a Cubase Pro here, so I could have used frequency, but I realized that not everybody who's watching does have Cubase Pro or frequency, which is why I've wound up using a De-Esser, because I do believe that a De-Esser comes with every version of Cubase. But just for the sake of curiosity, let me show you how you go about setting that up in frequency if you wanted to. So again, on my bass group, I've got my kick comparison channel. And as I hover my mouse over the frequency analyzer, you can see with the crosshair and this section here that we can see the frequency at which the kick drum is hitting. So it says it's hitting on G0 at 48.9 Hertz. So let's go to frequency. I'm going to select band 2. And one of the cool things with frequency is we can just actually select the note using the keyboard along the bottom. So let's go to G0. And then I'm going to click this single band mode so I can just see EQ band 2. Then I need to set up the sidechain. So activate sidechain, hit the cog, go to add sidechain source, and I'm going to select the kick drum. Okay, once that's set up, then we need to set up the sidechain source to be our sidechain 1. You can see we can have up to 8 different sidechains within a frequency, which is cool, but yeah, we only have one so far, which is the kick drum. And now the same thing should happen here as what was happening with the compressor, in that we should see this meter move every time the kick drum hits. Now, because it's an EQ, it works slightly different from the compressor, but rather than the threshold amount on the compressor, we actually have this gain amount here, which looks like it's just doing an EQ cut, but it's actually not, as you will see when I hit play. And then we just have the same ratio, attack, and release as we did in the compressor. So as you can see, what we have going on here is that every time the kick drum hits, it's just going to duck that particular EQ band. And of course, we can tighten that up with the Q factor. We can reduce how much is being ducked with the gain. And like I say, we have attack and release. So as I turn this on and off, remember to listen to just the kick drum. Now it does seem a little bit counterintuitive to listen to the kick drum when I'm actually processing the bass, but that's just the way that I hear it in my head. So hopefully you guys will be able to follow along with what's going on inside my brain. But yeah, listen to the kick drum. As I turn it on and off, the kick drum seems to get tighter with the EQ on and more flabby with the EQ off. Right, so let's get on to how I've done this with a De-Esser. So for those that don't know, a De-Esser is a tool that was created to get rid of sibilance in vocals. So sibilance is that kind of whistly sound that happens when you record somebody speaking through a microphone and they say like the letter S or F. Sometimes you get like a mad whistly sound. And what a De-Esser does basically is reduces those frequencies that happen around the whistly S's. Hence the name De-Esser. Now, De-Essers can also be used for other things. Like I use them a lot of times on a drum bus to get rid of some of those harsh frequencies in hi-hats. I've also seen people use it on their master bus for similar things. But what I'm going to do now is use it to separate a kick and a bass because I've never seen anyone do it. And I thought, why not make a video on it? So I have a Cubase's De-Esser set up on my bass group. And the first thing I need to do is the same thing we did with the compressor and with the dynamic EQ, and that's to set up the sidechain input. And it'll be no surprise, I'm using my kick drum. Now, what a De-Esser is basically is a compressor, but one that only works over a frequency band that you specify. And I have my frequency band specified here using the low and the high markers. So we also have a threshold dial here. We have reduct, which determines how much reduction is happening. And of course, we have a release. So let's have a listen, and I'll do an A-B so you can hear the difference. Again, we're listening to the kick drum. Now, I really like that because it sounds like the kick drum is being lifted up in the mix, but as you can see, I'm not touching the kick drum. And you hear now when I play this within the context of the mix, the same thing happens with the kick drum, but you don't really perceive too much difference with the bass like you would do if you were doing the full-on sidechain compression or just the static EQ. So let's bring back all of the other elements in the mix. And again, just listen to the kick drum, even though there's a lot of things happening. I was just playing about with how wide the band that's being compressed is, and I do actually quite like it as a wider band. Right, so if you made it this far through the video, first of all, thank you. Now, I do want to say that one of the questions that I get asked the most is, can I make a video making a full track from start to finish? Now, I have been trying streaming on YouTube, but it seems to be affecting my statistics quite a bit. So I've moved my streaming over to Twitch, and I did make this whole track from a blank project to what it is now over on Twitch. So if that kind of thing appeals to you, I will put a link to my Twitch page in the description below. But anyway, that's it for now. I've been Craig Lopez. This has been Tutorialism. Now go make some music. Peace.